Hello, I'm Andrew,
And I'm Sam.
and this is Teens Talk Politics. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the week's news, starting from last Friday to this Thursday. And our first topic that we'll be talking about is the January 6th hearings that happened this Wednesday. And this is the first major hearing that we had not major hearing, the first hearing period that we've had. And the reason for this is because they passed a nonpartisan investigation in the House, and of course got filibustered in the Senate, much to many of the senators' chagrin on both the Republican and the Democratic side. So this is not a neutral investigation, but however it is a bipartisan investigation. There are I think 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans, with the Republicans on this committee being Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. So Sam, do you have any thoughts on the hearings that happened?
I think I'm glad they're trying to pull some bipartisan support. But as we were saying a few episodes ago, we need to continue to get stuff done, and I'm glad they're starting to make this progress against these again on the ethics and just the stuff that went down on the January 6th committee. I'm glad they're finally starting to get the cogs turning, because it didn't look like it was doing that for quite a while. It looks like they're just trying. I'm glad they're kind of starting to push along and get things done so that we can hold these people responsible for inciting this violence and doing these things, committing these kind of atrocities, and so that we can get a better perspective into what happened on January 6th.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's nice that Democrats are trying to get a bipartisan investigation going. Democrats are trying to do that, however, a vast majority of Republicans in the House have refused to do that. Kevin McCarthy, I think we talked about this last week, nominated Jim Jordan and Jim Banks to be on this investigation. Nancy Pelosi said no to those two. There were a few other Republicans that he also nominated to be on the committee. Nancy Pelosi, being the Speaker, she has the power to say, no, you cannot have these people on the committee, and she did that. And many progressives, many moderate Democrats and Republicans supported that decision by Nancy Pelosi. And even Liz Cheney supported that, and she's not moderate in any sense of the word. She's very conservative. And Kevin McCarthy wanted her to do that. And I think we mentioned that last Friday. Because his whole goal is to make Nancy Pelosi look like she's abusing her power, which is not the case, but Kevin McCarthy is really good at shaping the situation to make it look like Nancy Pelosi is in the wrong, which she is most definitely not in the situation, because Kevin McCarthy purposely put Jim Jordan on here, which if Jim Jordan or Jim Banks were on here, probably nothing in this committee would ever get done, and they would probably try to avoid what actually happened on that day. So the Republican House, most of the Republican House members don't actually want to have a bipartisan committee, and they're just using this as a strategy for 2022, or for at least a vast majority of them are in the House. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, look, Democrats aren't going to let my Republicans on the committee that I've nominated. This is Kevin McCarthy speaking. So I'm going to use that against them in their campaigns in 2022, saying, oh, they're abusing their power. Oh, they're doing a partisan investigation to the January 6th attack, which is not the case anymore, because Liz Cheney agreed to come on because Nancy Pelosi did nominate her, and then Adam Kinzinger also agreed to come on, congressman from Illinois. So if it hadn't been for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger saying yes to being on this role in the committee, yes, this would be technically a partisan investigation. However, Democrats are making the attempt to making this bipartisan, and it has been successful. Yes, there are more Democrats on this committee than Republicans, but they have made much more of an effort to get this done, and they've specifically chosen Republicans that they know are actually going to do their duty as a congresswoman/congressman, and aren't just trying to take the investigation off the rails.
Yeah. And so, as I was saying earlier, and as you were mentioning, it's good that these cogs are turning, and that they're kind of, Nancy Pelosi, even though of the criticism by the Republican Party, and as you were saying, Kevin McCarthy trying to make her as you were saying, Kevin McCarthy trying to make Nancy Pelosi looks bad, she's still kind of persevering to get these cogs working, to get the hearings underway, to make sure justice is served. And I can really respect Nancy, and especially and a lot of the Democrats in the January 6th committee, for being resilient and trying to keep moving forward in order for justice to be served.
Yeah, and another thing that I will mention that happened yesterday in the January 6th hearings is when Jamie Raskin, he's a congressman from Maryland that's also on the committee. He was also he was on the impeachment team back in, I think it was February, in the impeachment of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He was confronting, in the hearing, a Republican that was comparing the rioters to tourists. And I think he did a wonderful job of conveying how wrong that Republican congressman was. I don't remember his name, but how wrong he was to compare these two people, saying if you hadn't known that there had been riots, you would have just thought that this had been a normal tourist visit. I don't know if that was the exact quote, but it was very similar to that. And how the Republican defended his quote, I think, was very alarming. Because he said that Congressman Raskin, was just taking his words out of context, which he was most definitely not. And like we said, just like Kevin McCarthy was doing with Nancy Pelosi, he's just trying, this Republican congressman is just trying to make Democrats look bad, which could work in the short term. But the history books are not going to look back lightly at this, and I think we've talked about this many times on the show, about how Republicans aren't being showed in the brightest light in the history books. I think this is just another example of that. So I think Jamie Raskin did a really good job at that. And all the other people in the committee, when they were asking questions to, I think it was four or five Capitol Police officers that were at the Capitol, that were being interviewed or interrogated about what happened on the January 6th Capitol attack. And I think it was like 3/4 of them had suffered injuries, lost fingers, and lost other things because of these rioters. And they've actually felt this physically as well as probably mentally. And it was really nice to see how these Capitol Police officers want this to continue, want this investigation to continue. And I think it matters a lot more coming from them than it would coming from a Democratic congressman or a Democrat speaker, because they were there. They were protecting representatives and senators and their staff members, and they were there on the front lines on the day of January 6th. So I really think the introduction to these hearings yesterday, or for the people watching on Friday, Wednesday, and really showing the weight that it fell on these soldiers, Capitol Police officers, at the Capitol.
So yeah, it's kind of like, so it's like, you gotta, as Andrew was saying, you gotta, like, especially these Republicans, you gotta, like, step up, like, making these off suggestions. Like, I'm pretty sure those police officers that were fighting to protect you would disagree. I think, like, a lot of these frontline workers trying to make sure that the rioters don't hurt you, I think would disagree with what you're saying, that these people are just tourists. Like, it's...
Yeah.
Like, you like, it's not fun, and it's not fair, and it's unjust for you to continue acting like the January 6th was nothing. And I think that's a very, as Andrew was saying, something that the history books will not see lightly on.
Yeah, and then another thing I want to mention is about the introduction that both Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and how they introduced themselves, and why they decided, not necessarily why they decided, but really how important it was for them to serve on this committee. And I think we should probably play that right now. We'll play both Adam Kinzinger's and Liz Cheney's introduction, and how heartfelt it felt towards the police officers, and also how they felt in the Capitol.
For an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thompson. Thank you to all my colleagues on this committee. And thank you to each of the witnesses appearing before us today. It is because of you. You held the line. You defended all of us. You defended the Capitol, and you defended the Constitution and our republic. And every American owes you our undying gratitude. Every one of us here on the dais voted for and would have preferred that these matters be investigated by an independent, nonpartisan commission. Although such a commission was opposed by my own leadership in the House, it overwhelmingly passed with the support of 35 Republican members. We cannot leave the violence of January 6th and its causes uninvestigated. The American people deserve the full and open testimony of every person with knowledge of the planning and preparation for January 6th.
I never expected a day to be quite as emotional for me as it has been. I've talked to a number of you and gotten to know you. I think it's important to tell you right now, though, you guys may individually feel a little broken. You guys all talk about the effects you have to deal with, and you talk about the impact of that day. But you guys won. You guys held. Democracies are not defined by our bad days. We're defined by how we come back from bad days. While we on this dais were whisked away from the danger, heroes like those here stood their post before it and paid the price.
Okay, now that you've seen both their introductions, I think it's very important for both Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to understand, yes, they are the only Republicans that actually want to get something done, actually want to serve on this committee. Especially Liz Cheney, who used to be the number 3 Republican in the House, of course, got demoted. And she would probably have the opportunity to one day become the Speaker, but she chose being brave and standing up to the establishment of the Republican Party, and of course getting demoted. But at the end of the day, people remember her in a greater light than in Kevin McCarthy. Mm-hmm. And also, Adam Kinzinger also needs to understand, just like Liz Cheney, he's the only other Republican that agrees to serve on this committee, actually understands that, okay, serving in the House is more important than keeping my seat. I actually need to do what the American people want me to serve as. Of course, in that district he serves in Illinois is a heavily Republican district that went to Trump by a heavy margin, and probably there were people at the Capitol that was from that district, so probably a majority of people in that district don't want him to serve on it. But at the end of the day, he needs to stand up. He is a leader. He was represented to lead that congressional district. So he's stood up and he wants to serve on this committee, and he should, because he's gonna really show what happened on that day on January 6th. And I think it's very important for them to understand that they've stood above all of their other Republican colleagues. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there is much else to talk about for the January 6th hearings. Of course, we could go on and on about exactly detail of what happened there. But I think for time's sake, we should probably move on. Unless Sam has anything else?
I think it's perfect.
Okay. Next thing is Biden's going to be announcing federal vaccine requirements for any federal employees.
Now,
this is not a major thing, however, this is very important because it shows a lot of people that to work in the federal government, of course, you need to have a vaccine. And if President Biden is trusting all of his federal employees to get vaccinated, I would hope that it helps others that aren't working in the federal government, however, haven't gotten vaccinated yet. They don't trust the science that is pretty obviously in favor of taking the vaccine. And this could possibly enforce the idea that maybe they should get the vaccine. And I think this is important for Biden to show any way, shape or possible, to get people to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, we are only halfway done. Only 50%, or I don't know if it's 50%, maybe it's 49
It's
or something.
very close to 50%.
Very close to 50% of people have been fully vaccinated in the United States. And that's not even close to herd immunity. Of course, if the great numbers that we were getting at the beginning of vaccine rollout, where people were trying to get vaccinated, people that wanted the vaccine were getting the vaccine, the numbers of the how many people have gotten fully vaccinated shot up very quickly. However, the only people that are left to get vaccinated are people that don't want to get the vaccine. Quote, don't trust the science, end quote. So I think it's very important for the president to show any way and how to show that, yes, you should get the vaccine. And I also think the FDA probably needs to approve this to solidify how important it is the vaccine, and the vaccine is more helpful than hurtful, has very few side effects, no side effects long term, unless the Johnson & Johnson with the blood clots. So we need to do everything. Federal employees, the president, United States leaders, senators, congressmen, and women, they need to show how important it is to get the vaccine. I know the Republican congressman, governor of Florida, and Sean Hannity, a bunch of big Republican names, are now pushing to get people vaccinated, which back 2 months ago, Sean Hannity was saying, maybe I shouldn't get the vaccine, there's not much out, but I think he's really just covering his ass at this point because of how much calls he's gotten to resign. So I think it's very important for people like that to come out and say, yes, you should get vaccinated, especially Sean Hannity's audience, who is primarily Republican, primarily people that don't want to get the vaccine. Maybe not primarily, but a large portion of people that aren't vaccinated are watching Fox News. So I think it's very important for people like that to come out and say we should get vaccinated. And I think this is a good step to get all federal employees to have a requirement to get the vaccine.
I think it was a very smart move by Joe Biden in doing this, because he's showing how the necessariness that is getting this the vaccine, and how the government shouldn't and can't function if its employees aren't protected. And I think I think sadly it's a bit of a political move too, so that he can show that vaccinations are important, useful, and good. And to respond to your earlier statement, at the time of this recording, 49.8% of the United States population has been fully vaccinated. So I'm certain in the next coming days that more people will be vaccinated. And it looks like that more people are getting born now than they are getting vaccinated, which could be an issue. Well, not really, but we're getting there now. Now keep getting vaccinated, right. And it's a very smart move by Joe Biden in order to get this country more safe, because there's a surprising amount of people in the United States work for the federal government, and this could help as only a few of them are vaccinated. And it could also make sure that no other political figures as federal aides and stuff like that, as federal aides and stuff like that, as get their Congress people sick, and so that's very.
And there was another congressman from Louisiana. His name's Steve Scalise, I think is how you pronounce it. He was a major don't get the vaccine. The science hasn't been proven yet, and he has now gotten his vaccine, and he is now pushing to get people to get vaccinated, which is very important for people like that were formerly how about be cautious around the vaccine. Maybe you shouldn't get the vaccination because of some dumb reason or something. So I think it's important, like I said, for people like that to get out and say, actually, I got the vaccine. Nothing happened to me. I was originally anti-vax, but I'm fine now. And to get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So unless Sam has anything else, we're going on to our last story.
I think that's it.
Okay, so this is very big because this has been worked on for several months at this point. It's now the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So it's very complicated and convoluted because a lot of Democrats are trying to push this infrastructure bill, but not physical infrastructure necessarily. More liberal policies at the border and immigration policies and stuff that weren't technically infrastructure, but they're trying to modernize the word infrastructure to include more progressive ideals. However, Republicans are like, okay, I'm not going to vote for this bill unless it's only physical infrastructure. For example, Rob Portman, this was several months ago, was saying, I'm only going to vote for this if they narrow down the bill, only focusing on physical infrastructure. I don't know if that was the exact quote, but it was very similar to that. Of course, Rob Portman, I think, has now endorsed this bill. Mm-hmm. Not endorsed, co-sponsored, sorry. So has a bunch of other moderates, Joe Manchin, I'm sure Bill Cassidy did it, and I think Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins are the moderates, of course, and several Democrats have as well. And of course, they need to get their 60 votes, otherwise the filibuster comes into place. I think this won't do as much as a lot of progressive Democrats wanted. However, I think this is a good start for infrastructure. There has not been, this is the biggest infrastructure package ever created. And I remember at Joe Biden's town hall, the bridge in Ohio, I don't know what it's called. If Sam does, just butt in. But the bridge that's been damaged, Trump said he was going to repair it. President Obama said he was going to repair it. And of course, nothing happened. And now President Biden has taken the initiative to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to get this infrastructure bill. And this will help infrastructure, especially on this bill in Ohio. Like in the town hall, he was like, I'm going to fix this dang bridge. And of course, if this bipartisan infrastructure bill gets voted on in the Senate, gets more than 60 votes, 60 or more votes, the president signs it, then yes, this bridge can get fixed, and then he will have kept his promise in Ohio. So I think it's important for Republicans to understand, how about I vote for this? Yes, it's not going to make Republicans look very good. It's going to make Democrats look good in the long run, at least until 2022. Because Democrats can say, oh, I got you this infrastructure bill in a bipartisan manner, how about you just keep us in power? Which probably will happen if this bill gets passed. But a lot of Republicans that are either going to be retiring, Rob Portman's retiring, Richard Burr is retiring, a lot of them, Richard Shelby's retiring. I don't think Richard Shelby's going to vote for this because, he's Richard Shelby. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's very important for Republicans to understand, how about we do the right thing? Do the right thing for the American people. How about we vote for this infrastructure bill that several presidencies, up to 10 some years ago, have said that they were going to do something about it, and they never did.
Yep.
And now President Biden has put it on the table, said we're going to get this done. After several meetings in the White House and at the Capitol building, they've finally gotten to a bipartisan infrastructure bill, and hopefully will be voted on soon.
Yeah, I'm glad. So yeah, to answer your previous question, the Brent Spence Bridge in Cincinnati, Ohio, it has been damaged for a few years, and and the infrastructure bill will hopefully fix it.
Good, yeah. So I think, unless Sam has anything to add, do you?
No, but I am glad that this infrastructure bill is finally moving, and it's really good that progress is finally being made in Congress to better the nation.
Well, anyways, thanks for tuning in to this week's news. We'll be back on Tuesday for another video, and then the next week's video for the weekly news will be up next Friday. And thank you for watching. Make sure to tune in then.
Bye.